Good morning. Glad that you're here. Today we get to pick on Hallie a little bit. Excited about that? No, I'm kidding. I went up to her before service. I said, "You have your speech ready?" And um, I think you'd have been ready if I'd have, you know, tried to make her a little nervous. But she's composed, and that's good. We're going to be in Psalms chapter 1 today. And Hallie, I'm not going to preach directly at you. This is for all of us. These are things that, but we want to congratulate and commend you on completing, what have we got, a week officially? 2 weeks. Okay. Stay the course. Hear that part today. Stay the course. You're only 2 weeks. But no, that's good. But we are very proud of you. And Tiffany was unable to be here. We're going to catch up with her. We have her Bible and stuff from last year. We didn't get to do that with some of the COVID things, and so we will catch up with her on that. But anyway, I want to start with a quote from Corrie ten Boom. It's actually in your announcement sheet this morning. It says, "Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God." There's probably, outside of Scripture, there's probably fewer words truer for us to hang on to. The fact that we don't know much about the future, do we? We don't know what it holds. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And so we walk and live by faith because we trust in a known God. God has not left us without experience, without evidence, without hope. And that's where we invest ourselves. So that when things are a little cloudy or gray or unsure, we have a known God that we can go to. I want to go ahead and read the verses today from the text. And I was going to tell Mitchell this will probably be my shortest sermon of the year, but I don't want him to lose hope that maybe next week I'll do a short one too. But in Psalms 1, let's start there. It says, "How blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. And in his law he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree firmly planted by streams of water, which yield its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither, and in whatever he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but they are like chaff, which the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish." Now the psalmist, in writing this first book for us, I'm not sure how the tune went, but the song here is presenting for us a choice. It's a life choice. It's a choice that you and I make every day. I think there's a lot of things in life that catch our eye. That's how I was once told. I had a friend who was deeply into marketing. I mean, the guy was extremely versed. He knew how to market. And we were talking about a commercial. And I said, I don't get that commercial. He said, "It wasn't for you to get." He said, "They are that targeted. They understand. If you don't get it, it wasn't meant for you anyway, so don't worry about it. You wouldn't buy it anyway." But there are things that catch our eye, and not everything that catches our eyes is good. Not everything that we are drawn to is something that is beneficial or helpful. And as the psalmist writes, he starts with a contrast. He says, "Blessed is the man who does not." Not blessed is the man who does this, but blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. Now, there's a progression, and I know we've looked at this before. There's a progression in these words. First, there's this kind of you walk alongside, and you start connecting. And then pretty soon you're standing with. And then you feel comfortable to sit with. And he's describing that in those first couple of verses as something that's dangerous for us. That it is a danger for us to pursue or entertain something that's not good for us. And so he gives us that warning and describes this path of the righteous. He doesn't believe and behave like or belong to the wicked. There is a choice. And so maybe I'll define it, and I'm going to come back into this at the end. But let's define this in simple terms as a fork in the road. So Psalms 1 is that. It's you have this choice. You can go this way, and you can walk, stand, and sit with those who are wicked. But we're going to find out by the end that's not really a good thing. Or you can choose this way, the way that leads us closer to God. And there's a distinct difference. And it's interesting that the psalmist uses something that we can identify with, or the lack of, and that's water. Johnny prayed this morning for water. We need a good rain. And it'd be okay if it fell for a couple of days, probably. Nice and slow. Going to Amarillo the other day, I cut across that dawn to Wildorado because some reason I have an aversion to 72,000 stoplights when I get to Amarillo. So I like to go ahead and get on the north side and not have that. But anyway, somebody had chiseled some ground, and the dirt clods were like this. I thought, good grief, that's going to be terrible. You have to really work that to get it where you can use it, because it's just so dry. And he uses that to compare righteous versus wicked. Notice in verse 3, he will be like a tree firmly planted by streams of water. Now you have to back into verse 2 to know what he's comparing. But his delight is on the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. When we seek God's counsel, when we trust what Jesus has done, and we engage that direction, it's like a tree planted next to the stream. Now that tree got a good spot, didn't he? Yeah, I know we hear say you got to bloom where you're planted. Well, if I want to bloom, I'd just soon be by the water. It's a lot easier to draw from. The leaves aren't wilted. For those who are more scientific, their turgor pressure is up because they have water. Not so with the wicked. We can understand how they look like. It says in verse 4, they are like chaff. My yard's still kind of yellow across the street. I've thrown a little water at it, but my trees are taking it all. I could throw a lot of water at it, maybe green it up for a little while, but you walk across that, it's crunchy. My boots get dirty. And all that stuff just sort of blows away. It's kind of discouraging. No matter how good the wicked present, no matter how good the world presents, it's still chaff. There's no substance to it. It's not like the tree that's planted by the water. So how are we going to choose here? Because he makes it pretty simple. You have the path of the righteous. You kind of have the pleasure of the righteous would be in the pursuit of God and his word. You have verses 3 through 6, that prosperity of the righteous. He draws that comparison. Verse 4, or verse 5, therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment. Now, I realize that I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. But he doesn't leave a lot of gray area there, does he? The wicked will not stand in the judgment. Why? Because there's nothing for them to stand upon. There's no anchor, there's no root, there's no water, there's no hope, there's no life. What could they stand for? No sinners in the assembly of the righteous, for the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. And so we kind of have a decision, and it's if we pay attention, because Satan works real hard to help us buy into verse 1, to where we walk, stand, and sit with those who have little to do with God. And get distracted in our purpose in life and be challenged. And that happens, doesn't it? Life happens. And sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes it's easy to get distracted as to what I'm to be about. We talked this morning in Philippians chapter 3 with the idea of what that means to know Christ, the power of his resurrection, to share in his suffering, to make life choices that reflect a life that looks like Jesus. And so as the psalmist presents for us a fork in the road, a choice, the challenge, if we move into the New Testament and understand Jesus at all, Jesus is that choice. He is that fork in the road. There's a quote that I like. It was from a missionary. It's been a while back, a long while. His name was Jim Elliot. He died in Ecuador. He was a missionary, and his wife collected his writings, his prayers, and his journals. And she wrote a book later in life called In the Shadow of the Almighty. Now, I've had that book better part of 30 years. And there are parts of that book that humble me with his focus. When he gets to Ecuador to reach out to the tribes of Ecuador, and in a very short amount of time, one of those tribes kills him. I mean, like a week into his life pursuit of a missionary, he dies. But he says in one of his prayers, he says, "Father, make me a crisis man. Bring those I contact to decision. Let me not be a milepost on a single road. Make me a fork that men must turn one way or another on facing Christ in me." Interesting, I had a conversation recently and we were talking about mile markers. And maybe I'm just missing them, but I haven't seen those in a while. I don't even know if some of them are still up. Usually you see them. Clayton, do you see them on the road still, mile markers? That gives me hope. But how many of you pay attention to mile markers? I mean, those who drive professionally, they're a little more attentive. It lets you know kind of where you are. If you have to call for help, you're at mile marker whatever on highway whatever, if you pay attention to such things. But the mile markers, they stand about this high, and they just have a little number on them. There's nothing fancy about a mile marker. If you looked at a mile marker, you'd say, well, I don't think I'd want to be one of those. Because most people don't notice them. And Jim Elliot, in his prayer, He said, I don't want to be one of those that some people will notice, some people won't. Make me a fork in the road, just like Psalm 1 here. That when people see me, this is my paraphrase of the quote, when people see me, they see Jesus and they have to decide. Now that's something. He's not saying make me a big sign that shoves it down everybody's throat. But he is saying make me someone who helps people decide. And that's kind of what, Hallie, you're at the beginning of your college career, and you're going to have lots of forks in the road and lots of choices. Some of those will, as your family here, will encourage you and help you in navigating some of that. But I wish we could tell you adulthood was a lot more fun than what it's going to be. So I'm going to tell you we're here for you. But I also want to challenge you, as I challenge each one of us, that we live our lives in such a way that we look like this tree that's planted next to the water, that produces its fruit in season, that is firing on all cylinders, that is obvious what it is. And that we live in such a way that we are obvious as to who we are and to whom we belong. And that's seen and reflected in the choices that we make and the decisions that we make and the life that we choose to live. Because I assure you there are people out there that you will influence by your life that you may or may not know that they're watching you, needing inspiration and hope. And because you live your life in such a way that they would find that in you. So I want to encourage you today. I want to kind of bookend Psalm 1 with the reminder never to be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. And let us be crisis people. That when people see us, they see Jesus, and there's a decision that has to be made. They have to choose. Because there is no other. And when we choose and give them the opportunity to choose, we're giving them an opportunity to avoid peril and face eternity with hope. And man, what a blessing that is. That's the encouragement that I want to offer you today. We're going to have an invitation song, and then we're going to honor Hallie. We have a little slideshow. I used nearly all the pictures, plus I'm doing my best to make you nervous, Hallie. But for all of us, I want to encourage you to decide, not just today, but tomorrow, who you are, who you're going to be, where you're going. Somebody will follow you there. Make sure it's a good place to go. Make sure it leads you home with Christ. If we can help you today in your walk and in your relationship, please feel free to come now as we stand and sing.